This is the Capitol Rundown.
It's not just saying I'm a business person and that's going to do it, but I know he's been through this, and he can make a compelling case.
Many Americans are rightfully concerned about so-called forever wars. I know this administration is laser focused.
What's going on in the country right now is the loss of our constitutional rights.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Jorma Duran. From Lansing to Washington, D.C., there's always a lot happening in Michigan politics, so let's get started. We begin with the news from Minnesota that spread anger across the nation over this past week. On January 7th, Renee Good was shot to death by ICE agents in Minneapolis. Video shows her in an SUV attempting to drive away from a group of agents when one of them opened fire. And then, last Saturday, protester Alex Pretti was shot several times by ICE agents after being tackled to the ground while he was helping another protester who got pushed down. On the floor of the Senate on Wednesday, Democratic U.S. Senator Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan pointed to those deaths and added that dozens have died in ICE custody nationwide. She urged Congress to separate and restrict funding for the Department of Homeland Security and ICE until major reforms are made, including requiring body cameras, visible identification, judicial warrants, and the same rules that local police must follow.
We have fundamental freedoms that make us different than almost every other country of the world, and we need to defend them vigorously. And in fact, those people who are standing up and exercising those rights are doing the most patriotic thing they can do right now.
Her fellow Democratic senator from Michigan, Gary Peters, said on social media that DHS operations are not making Americans safer, but rather they're causing, quote, chaos and fear. Meanwhile, some Republicans are also calling for more transparency in DHS operations and tactics. Congressman Tom Barrett of Michigan said in a statement that there should be a thorough investigation into the shootings based on facts. Regular people in Michigan are also making their voices heard. A group of protesters in Lansing told the Rundown they were upset by the recent violence they say has been brought to our communities by ICE. One of them says he feels the most basic rights Americans have are being violated.
What's going on in the country right now is the loss of our constitutional rights. And that's worth being out here. It feels wonderful to know that states besides Minnesota, people are paying attention.
That protest was on Tuesday, and more were scheduled in various Michigan locations throughout the week and planned this weekend. Coming up on the Capitol Rundown, our Capitol correspondent will be here for you with a look at the latest political news from Lansing. And right after the break, there's been a shakeup in the race to become Michigan's governor, involving President Donald Trump's possible preference of candidates for the GOP. That story and a whole lot more when we come back. Welcome back. The Republican gubernatorial primary just increased by one as multimillionaire businessman Perry Johnson gets into the race, and it's one he's tried to run before. Johnson was also in the Republican primary in 2022, but the state's election bureau ruled he did not submit enough valid signatures required for nominating petitions. Then he ran for the Republican nomination for president in 2023, but never qualified for debates and suffered low poll numbers. Still, he spoke at the Republican National Convention in 2024 in support of Donald Trump. Jim Runstad, chair of the Michigan GOP, says Johnson's entry will alter things a bit.
It's not just saying I'm a business person and that's going to do it, but I know he's been through this, and he can make a compelling case.
Johnson is aiming for the endorsement of President Trump, but he has no promise from the president he'll get it. Here's State Democratic Party Chair Curtis Hertel Jr.'s response to that.
I don't know any human being that actually can see the modern day politics that we have and think that Donald Trump is the horse that you want to ride. His numbers in Michigan are pretty terrible.
Republican State Representative Matt Maddock told reporters that President Trump encouraged Johnson to run and wants John James to stay in Congress. In another election shakeup, Democratic candidate for State Attorney General Mark Totten says he's suspending his campaign. In a social media post, the former U.S. attorney says, quote, "Following recent endorsements by major labor unions, I have concluded there is not a viable path forward through an early endorsement convention." He also says he looks forward to supporting the Democratic nominee. The day before Totten's announcement, the UAW endorsed Oakland County Prosecutor Karen McDonald, a Democrat, for Attorney General. Attorney William Noakes and Washtenaw County Prosecutor Eli Savitt are also running for the Democratic nomination. Later on the Capitol Rundown, the debate over data centers continues across Michigan. But first, our Capitol correspondent will be here for you to tell us more about the shakeup in the governor's race. That's coming up right after the break. Welcome back. As you saw earlier, the race for governor, at least for Republicans, just changed. Our Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic talked to the Rundown's Kirk Montgomery about that and more.
It's time to get updated on Michigan politics, and there's nobody better, as you know, than our own Tim Skubic. And Tim, we just watched a report on Perry Johnson entering the race for governor. Now, what is the latest on that?
Well, you're going Perry Johnson. Don't I recognize that name from somewhere? Well, indeed you do, if you remember him. He ran for governor in 2022. Never got on the ballot. Remember, he had a little problem gathering enough ballot petition signatures. Well, this time out, he's got a team together that he promises everybody he'll get the 15 to 30,000 names he get on the ballot, and he also promises a lot of money. Over the next 60 days, $9 million, and he told folks the other day that he'll spend whatever it takes. Now, the Democrats are saying, you know what, you can't buy the governorship. And they think this guy, well, he is a businessman. You need more than these credentials. And so Mr. Johnson is in the race. According to the Republican Party chair, Kurt, he shakes everything up for all the other candidates who now, he says, have to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to win by factoring in a guy named Perry Johnson. He figures he's got a shot at this thing. And with that kind of money, you'd have to concede. Indeed, he does. The question is, how big of a shot is it? And can he undo what he undid back in 2022? We're about to find out. It's going to be an interesting race with him in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, another thing here, the Governor Gretchen Whitmer's father recently passed away. And, of course, besides the obvious reason, who was he to state politics?
You know, when I got in this business, Kurt, I didn't know that I was going to meet so many good people. And I'm not trying to suck up to anybody, but the fact of the matter is, one of the good people that we had in Michigan, a public servant and a fine entrepreneur who worked for Blue Cross Blue Shield as a CEO, was Dick Whitmer. The governor has lost not only her father, but actually her closest advisor. As we heard in a piece that we did last week, he was one of the first people that she went to and said, "Dad, I want to run for governor. What do you think?" And he basically gave her a lot of advice, gave her a lot of room to talk. And at the end of the day, she decided to go, and she went with his entire blessing. As irony would have it, he was in the intensive care unit a couple of weeks ago, and after he got out, he sent me a copy through the governor of the book that he wrote. I didn't know he had written a book. And I said, where did this come from? Now, if you know anything about politics, when you write a book, it's sort of ego-oriented. Nothing like this in here. He was talking about ways to navigate life and what to do and what not to do. And I want to just read one portion about a section that I remember the most about him, and that was his laugh. He says, quote, "If you don't think things are funny, you're in trouble. If you can't laugh, and particularly if you can't laugh at yourself, you're in real deep trouble." Mr. Whitmer, it was a pleasure to cover you, sir. He will be missed in this town by a whole host of people who found him fun to be around, including his daughter, and our best to her as well.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio was on Capitol Hill Wednesday testifying about U.S. involvement in Venezuela. Washington correspondent Trevor Shirley has more.
Democrats are pushing for more details on whether the U.S. has plans to target other leaders or countries in South America.
And Marco Rubio, what is he, jobs of everything and oversight of nothing.
And some Republicans want answers about the possibility of open-ended military operations in the region, as they're hesitant the U.S. will get sucked into more foreign entanglements.
Many Americans are rightfully concerned about so-called forever wars. I know this administration is laser-focused on avoiding those experiences.
Both sides are also wanting answers about when Venezuelan elections will happen, as most senators agree democracy in the country must be restored soon.
We want to reach a phase of transition where we are left with a friendly, stable, prosperous Venezuela, and democratic, in which all elements of society are represented in free and fair elections.
Rubio says the U.S. is in the process of transitioning Venezuela from a, quote, criminal state into an international partner, as well as open up the country's energy sector to U.S. oil companies. But some Democrats have called out the U.S. naval blockade of Venezuela, saying it's costing American taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars with uncertain returns.
Outside estimates are as high as $1 billion. And yet, the Maduro regime is essentially still in power. All the same people are running the country.
Ahead on the rundown, we'll show you how Michigan honored those who lost their lives in one of the worst genocides in history. And coming up next, the debate over data centers in Michigan was the focus of a hearing in the State House. We'll get you updated after the break. Welcome back. More and more data center projects are popping up across Michigan, and it's forcing state lawmakers to look closer at how they affect communities. On Wednesday, a State House subcommittee heard presentations from 2 members of the Heartland Institute, a conservative think tank. Even they felt that some regulation is needed when it comes to data centers.
I am not someone who reflexively calls for government regulations. Quite the opposite, but I'm also someone who has spent a long time studying emerging technologies, and I'm increasingly concerned, not just as a policy analyst, but as a citizen.
Opponents say the sheer amount of power needed to run the centers is enough to power nearly 1.2 million homes. They also worry about who will pay for it all.
If infrastructure is built to serve a handful of very large users, but costs are spread broadly, families and small businesses end up subsidizing those users.
Lawmakers did not discuss any potential legislation Wednesday. Republican State Representative Steve Cara says they will be discussing data centers for the next several weeks with a focus on environmental impacts at the next one. Speaking of paying for things, President Trump is now touting his new Trump accounts. Our Washington correspondent, Maddie Beer-Temple, reports on the rollout.
We're going to give every newborn American child a financial stake in the future.
$1,000 in the stock market for babies now and a shot at financial freedom years down the road. That's what President Trump says the new Trump accounts will give families.
We're going to put $3 to $4 trillion of wealth into the hands of young Americans.
Established in the Big Beautiful Bill, these government-created tax-free investment accounts will be seeded with $1,000 from the Treasury for babies born between January 2025 and December 2028. Parents and loved ones can add up to $5,000 each year.
All Americans will begin their lives with a beautiful nest egg.
Children can tap into the funds once they're 18 to pay for school, buy a house, or start a business. Or they can let the money grow, like a retirement account. Families thanked the president on stage.
This sends a powerful message that this administration believes that financial opportunity can start early.
Even rapper Nicki Minaj was there.
I am probably the president's #1 fan.
Parents can activate the accounts this July at trumpaccounts.gov or sign up by filling out a form on their 2025 taxes. Under a high-yield scenario with maximum contributions made over time, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says a Trump account could make your grown child a millionaire.
The projected value will be nearly $1.1 million by the time they are 28 years old.
In Washington, I'm Maddie Beertemple.
Still to come, we take a look at an event to remember victims of the Nazi Holocaust in World War II. An event was held at the Capitol to mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day. That story when the Capitol Rundown returns. Tuesday was International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Here in Michigan, an event was held that honored the past and gave a warning for the future. The Rundown's Karina Prieto has the details.
On commemoration days like today, I implore you to not only remember the past, but commit in the present to fighting prejudice, hatred, and anti-Semitism.
Susan Fieber's mother, Frida Langness, lived through the Holocaust more than 80 years ago.
On International Holocaust Remembrance Day today, my family, like so many others, reflect on not only the unimaginable loss of 6 million individual Jewish lives, including my mother's grandparents and all her aunts and uncles, that's one cousin, but on the strength and resilience and responsibility carried by those who survived and by the generations that followed.
Tuesday, Fieber shared her mother's stories and struggles being born in 1935 in modern-day Poland.
People were getting more and more afraid to be around Jews. Her nanny stopped working for them. The people in the building stopped playing them with her.
As the war progressed, the Langness family struggled to find refuge.
They were considered enemies of the state because most of them were German.
Her family eventually sailed to New York, but had to leave many loved ones behind. Tuesday's remembrance event also focused on educating our communities on the horrors of the Holocaust and the dangers of hateful rhetoric.
Nationally, about half of millennials and Gen Zers do not know how many Jews were murdered and are unable to name a single concentration camp.
While hate speech is not criminal, it's also much more than just offensive. The relationship between hate speech and targeted violence is cause and effect.
Attendees at the event filled out these reflection cards, which read, "What can I do to fight anti-Semitism to encourage the continuous work towards a more harmonious and accepting future?"
It is our duty to humanity not only to remember, but to ensure that history never repeats itself.
Although the current Jewish population is still smaller than it was before World War II, attendees say they have hope for a more inclusive future.
Karina Prieto, The Capitol Rundown.
And that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching The Capitol Rundown.